Hello, Culture Matters podcast. Here's a quote just for this episode. When you have something to say, silence is a lie. Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. Today I'm joined by a friend of the Culture Matters podcast. Been on the show before, and we're giving tribute to Charlie Kirk. His father was an architect, mother a stock trader turned mental health counselor. Teens started an organization that would meet with students at the great institutions to have dialogue around vitally important ideas of our times. I'm joined by Demetri Stakias. Thank you for investing time into this conversation. And I should add, it's a bit overwhelmed there for a minute. September 10th, 2025, we witnessed the loss of that teen turned 31-year-old father of two, boy and girl, murdered at a rally of 4 or 5,000 people in a university after receiving a question. And in response, I remember where I was when I got ran a video sent to me unasked for from somebody that I care about that I think was trying to process that shock and awe that got sent to me and my wife. So, Demetri, um, what where do we go from here?
I mean, thanks for having me on the show. And I'd like to open with a quote from Aristotle that would speak to the current times and to Charlie and his efforts, that courage is the virtue that makes all others possible. So he was courageous, not only in that he was a man of faith and a strong leader of families, he inspired others to do the same, to stand up to people who you were diametrically opposed to. Because we're taught to live in camps and tribes and not even interact anymore with people that we oppose with. So he took people with grace, like the Lord did and his apostles, right? So being a good disciple, he stood up for that and went to colleges and went to the belly of the beast and said, bring all the best PhDs against someone who didn't even take one college course, but he has studied and he has learned. A lot of people looked up to him. And the saddest reality, and this is something I would love for us to reflect on, is he literally in his little tent said, "Prove me wrong." And so in one snap trigger decision, somebody proved him wrong. So in that moment, won the argument, but they didn't win the war. Because right now a new war is brewing. And what kind of war do you think is brewing behind the surface right now?
It's less content and more personal? Because
I mean, I
that's
look at
how
I
there's a
look at
war of ideas, and then there's where I mean to have a debate around ideas, I think it's implicit that both parties are looking at the other. Okay, this is a we're two humans,
You're
and I'm
silencing a
not.
uniter, okay? So this is somebody who reaches across the aisle, right? In the same like spirit of
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Okay.
Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, right? They each were assassinated in front of their wife and kids, right? Um, you know, what did Medgar Evers do? What did he do wrong? He was the field secretary in Mississippi and leading civil rights advocate. And the guy was shot holding up a shirt that said Jim Crow must go. And then his family came out, picked him up, took him to the hospital. and the hospital refused to even see him because he was black. And they realized he was a prominent black, so they let him in, and then he died. And then that person didn't go to jail for 30 years because they were white nationalists. So right now, we don't know who did it. We think we know who did it. We think we know their motives, but we know what happens overall is that the tea kettle has been boiling. There's a lot of hateful rhetoric. When you disagree with someone and you throw a false label at them, whether it's racist, Nazi, I mean, you really like you take away that crime that a true victim of racism, a true victim of Holocaust horrors endured by just saying, oh, someone of a different opinion is now an enemy. We can have a different opinion. That's okay. We're different, you know, different spirits, different people grown under different circumstances. But we have to live under one flag, under one United States. And if you silence dissension and you silence people who are well articulated, all that's going to be left is the people who aren't as tolerant when you step up, when you yell at them, when you step to their face. There's a lot of videos out there, people who are less than moderate, and they'll step up and say, you know what? Enough. Enough with calling out for hate. And there is penalty now. If you step up online and you say you celebrate the death, the untimely assassination of a man who lives for the eternal, who's now a martyr, right? And you made the most epic quote of all, right? Repeat it for the one that you shared with Patrick.
Patrick, but David,
Yeah, what was the opener that you shared with him?
when the tyrant dies, his rule ends, and when the martyr di dies, his reign begins.
So he died a martyr. I mean, and he wasn't afraid because he was asked that question of how he wanted to be remembered, right? And then like what does that all mean to you? Like that his that this moment in time, right? That somebody devotes their life to this pursuit of truth, of faith, of family, of country, a return to real American values and not this subverted communist junk that's infected our colleges and schools and you know we're the living embodiment of what they predicted in the 80s. And you know, Alexander Solzhenitsyn and all of these thinkers said, "Oh, what we have here, you're going to have there soon." You know, we're in a 1984 Orwellian land sometimes. I want to be optimistic and hopeful for the future, but and then the way we do that is by speaking about Charlie's legacy, not anything he's done particularly wrong. Because what's wrong with having a good family? Like that's something that's not celebrated enough. In a time of oneness and being yourself, like you know, those honest values, the values that, you know, like my grandma was the 10th kid. If they didn't have a big family, right, you know, in the 30s, I would be here. And I'm not saying you have to have one, but when I look at the Amish families, I'm like, oh, they're doing something right. They love each other. They're kind to each other. They go to church on Sunday. They have a belief system, right? And they humble themselves. And this person always humbled himself, right? He always said, look, I'm doing the Lord's work, right? I'm speaking truth. I respect people, even if maybe inside me I want to snap at them or say something mean. It doesn't come out. There's no uh, there might be claims of hate, but no evidence. So you have a rich library and you know stories that can now be magnified. In fact, you know, even though I followed his content occasionally, more in the last week have I consumed his content and kind fond memories of him than ever. So his light is not put out; it's shared. What do you make of when
Uh,
the light is taken away from us too soon?
um, life is taken too soon. If if there was trust, if there, I think that's like sometimes in a company, if the leader steps away too soon, that right? Responsibility is modeled, like meaning the people see the person that is the leader from a title standpoint, how they show up, they see how they act and react and interact, and it influences them. Sometimes that leader steps away and the followers don't step up to the plate. Oftentimes, in my observation, that's because the leader wasn't living up to expectations, whether they realize that or not. Other times, the leader won't step out of the way, and the people have been ready for a decade or 2 decades. And so they don't have the at bats. You don't get to see their core values tested when they really are ready. When a leader has been living out the core values and the people are inspired and know what to do and why and how and can, right? And you take that person out, they're ready to run. In this case, if they're taken out in what is perceived to be by their constituents, their followers, their people, um, immoral and unjust and hard to fathom, I think that would lead to a tremendous inspiration, like a combination of inspiration from modeling the spirit and shame. Like in the sense that it's like, what, shame at myself. Oh, I could have been better. Well, why not me? I'm not as good. I'm not going to let them down. Let me show, I'll sacrifice more. I'll be better. Like it's because that's a way that's something useful to do with all that pain, all that anxiety. I think we in this is the pulling back of the bow. We need the friction, the pull. You could have the arrow, you could have the target, you could have the bow, but how far have you pulled the string back? That's the suffering. That's the right? He who has a why can bear almost anyhow. So is there a why? What's the relationship? How this leader showed up has had clearly inspired their people, like their people, those that follow them.
I think we've also been over tolerant. Like if we literally have ripped pages out of the DSM book and a lot of these mass shooters, literally the questions that came right before his assassination was about gang violence and trans shooters. And the person who is in custody is connected with such a dynamic. So I'm not saying things are wrong, but perhaps these things need to be investigated when people get their gun permits, right? And this is something talked about with Second Amendment, advocates of proponents. What lessons come out of this tragedy? Is it going to scare people from stepping up and speaking against someone they oppose, or just shaking their head and saying, "Well, that's them and not me"? Because if we close doors, they will win, whoever they are, the forces of power, the forces of division, the forces of agenda. They want us to be divided while they pass bills. They passed new bills restricting our freedom of speech while we were mourning this tragedy. They were offering to restrict people's passports if they criticize a certain country. So we have selective freedom taken away while we're in this theater of, sadness. So we don't even get to properly mourn anymore. Because typically, as a Christian, Orthodox Christian, we'd mourn for like 40 days. We want to feel sadness and sorrow. The loss of such a great man who not just built himself, but built up movement. You talked about the leader leaving the table. They left an empty seat, but there's a board of directors who more or less need to respect those values, and under hard scrutiny right now, if they don't, they're going to be asked to leave or change. And his wife, if you saw, I mean, you saw the steel in her eyes. I don't think she even wanted to step up, but now you're like, you're called. You're the fiery widow who knew that, the love of your life was taken too soon, and you can't let that memory die. You're not moving on.
Did you
You're
watch her speech?
Oh, it was just. I felt chills. I felt sadness. You know, you know that she just, the fire won't die. Like she that love that normally turns to grief for all of us is going to harden up into the movement, because now she has to raise those children again with the values that they shared together, and the movement that they built together, right? Like this is not something he just did himself. They did it as a family, and then they enlisted others who share in similar beliefs and got funded properly and built a network. So now different people are going to try to rise to power. You know what I mean? Like this is like paralleling Alexander's fall, right? When he fell, everyone else was, oh, I was his best friend. Oh, I'm the number one. I'm the number two. I was with them the most. So that means that I'm like, I seize power. Or I'm going to pick up the bloody microphone because I make the greatest quote first. It, it has to feel right. Like I said, give people time to mourn, or give them time to rest. If you're trying to step up to the plate right away, what are your true motives? What are your best intentions? You're revealing yourself, right?
Mm,
You're showing your cards.
mm,
So, I want to just praise him, praise the fact that
mm,
somebody can go to college, not having gone to college, and debate eloquently with anyone from any background, like that, to be prepared without notes, right? A lot of us are prepared. I have notes today. I imagine you have some notes, and we reference them, and that's great to have that, but he can just go in cold, ready, knows what to say. And nobody leaves saying, "Oh, I'm angry at you." Well, if they're angry, it's because they don't know how to, enunciate words and put them together in clear, concise sentences. And when you start taking the feel-good moments of today and try to rationalize them, they're not logical. So that's the point of these prove me wrong sessions. And even though somebody proved them wrong in that instant second, it's a Pyrrhic victory for them. It's very hollow. The point is shallow. It won't last. The sadness will fade, but what will grow is people not wanting to sit silent anymore. Too many of us sit silent with our when we say something that's wrong, we need to speak up. Like like locally, I don't know. I just want to bring attention to a local advocate for change in our VA system. It's kind of corrupt. It's kind of tolerant of crime. And this one young man on TikTok, his name is Serge Philly. He goes right to the hearings and says, "Hey, do you stand up for some citizens or all citizens? Are you standing up just for the blue side or the red side or all sides?" Wow. Like it's just a gust of fresh air. And that's what Charlie was. You know, we need to,
what do you say to those that say that's not that wasn't his message? As an Orthodox Christian, you said that's how you identify. So,
yeah. It says not to, it's not a lot. We have to be peaceful, and we're always told turn the other cheek. And so I've done that many, many, many times. But at some point, even other pastors would say, like, you got to rebuke the enemies. You got to flip the tables. When you see people, peddling their wares inside the temple, when they're subverting the movement, when they're not putting America first and they're putting some other countries first, well, that's not what we voted for. You know, I have one passport, right? And so should the people who are in our government. You know what I mean? Like who do you serve first? And without going on to all the details, he started opening the doors and knocking on some places that people don't go. And sometimes when you stand up for too much truth, you might get on people's radar and not the good ones. So when, like I said, just like the civil rights leaders, they woke up a lot of people, and he mobilized not just millions, but thousands of chapters. So people don't gather in person anymore. Again, you can gather a small room every so often, but to gather thousands of people regularly, it's like a new militia. And using those words is kind of hard in these times, but our government isn't run right. And when we stand up in the halls of government and say you're wrong, they want to arrest you. They want to criminalize you. Speech is criminalized, but violence is allowed. the shot that went around the world was seen by everyone, children and everyone alike. But the moment somebody questions something, it's removed. So we're the ants in the jar, like you mentioned in a prior episode. Like we're being shaken up now, and you know, people who are angry about the belief system of someone, process your anger privately. Like take a journal, go for a fall walk, like question why you have so much hate for someone who, again, just wants to do right by their family and their community. If you have hate for someone and you're sharing it online with friends, and you're the other side receiving this and you have a heart, start cutting off your friends. Start pruning that
What do
onion.
you think's behind the lack of physiological grief for those that had differing views of this, of Charlie?
I, I think we're
Because I
in,
think it's
yeah.
physiological. It's like
Oh yeah, yeah.
if my physiology was like, oh, this really hurts me,
There's no
and
empathy.
the other side, it's not hurting, so why not?
The other day, again,
Because
this.
physiology is
Oh
even
yeah.
beyond, it's like attraction. Oh, I'm just not attracted to that person. Well, I am attracted to that person. Well, why? Now you could Nietzsche said it's not a lack of love that builds uh it's not a lack of love that creates unhappy marriages. It's a lack of friendship. And like like the aesthetic goes away, but the friendship blossoms. So I'm curious about what's at the root, as a philosopher that you are and a theologian. What could be some of the things beyond or behind this the non-physiological grief?
I feel like, okay, so let's say in the hall of the Congress, right? Because this is the Democrat Republican issue. And Mike Johnson calls for a prayer, right? And the other side just wanted a moment of silence. You don't have to pray with them. Just put your head down and bow for a moment, right? And give that reflection time and commemorate somebody who was a family person who passed away tragically, right? If this was somebody who worked for NBC, ABC, or any of the networks, they would have called for that same prayer in the halls of Congress. And I guarantee you the same Republicans and conservatives would have stood up and said, yeah, that shouldn't have happened, right? But we didn't have that moment, or at least not yet. But if that should ever happen, you know, then what? Then will the tears come out for the cameras, for the likes, for someone's true motives, right? So the reason why they're not physiologically able to compel them is because they feel they have a lack of soul. I mean, I went to church on Sunday; it was full. The pastor reflected on recent events, and this is during the time of the discovery of the cross. When Constantine the Great, who moved the empire from Rome to Byzantium in modern day Istanbul, he sent his mom Saint Helen on an expedition to find the Holy Cross, where Jesus was crucified, and this buried piece of wood became the most sacred object in all of Christianity. Conquering death through death, and during that time, the priest says that we all have to just carry on with our crosses. So he carried a heavy burden. Charlie did, knowing that you're going to a hostile environment where people will not like you, and you're still going to smile, and you're still going to serve them kindness and warmth and grace, and knowing that you could be hurt physically in some fashion or form, and maybe not go home, and maybe deep down his wife and I hope his kids didn't know this, but now they know that their dad was a hero, right? In a way that, again, Martin Luther King had holes in his game. He had affairs, he had other things, right? And so did Malcolm X, and they had holes in their game. But this guy didn't have as many holes in his game. He didn't live long enough, right? Just like Alexander was taken out, what, 33,
Yeah.
right? 31. I mean, and he lived quite a life, like on the national stage, getting right there in front of the president regularly and the whole family, like, and his body taken to being escorted by the vice president. Like, these are honors. These aren't just, oh, somebody you know. Now, the nation has to move on, right? We have to move on with the goodness, but we can't we can't forgive. We can forgive, but we can't forget the hatred that brought us here. And so we have to try to love our enemies but also bring justice to those who would want to continue promoting hate and violence.
There's a quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn you mentioned. He was the author of the Gulag Archipelago, which means series of islands. There's 3 volumes in that book. I think I finished the first 2, halfway through the third. It's quite a book, quite a book. He wrote in prison, or he he thought it in prison. He essentially I think he had to hide it. Pretty intense. But he said this was in the Soviet Union. To destroy a people, you must first sever their roots. To destroy a people, you must first sever their roots. When I think of that quote, I think of the roots, right? I think of the assumed agreement, like it's implicit, it's not spoken or even thought of. Certain traditions, and he just said the the strength of a tradition is measured in how long it's been forgotten, or the strongest traditions are those that have been forgotten. That was it. The strongest, the most powerful traditions are those that have been forgotten. So in every culture, if it's stable, there's not infighting at a level where the fringe minorities on either side on the edge, because they always exist. It's a part of a functioning society is actually to have that fringe. For stability to occur, that fringe not grow too much in percentage of the whole. The strongest traditions are those that have been forgotten. Well, like they're just agreed upon. It's not even questioned because they're not even thought about. It's just embedded in the psyche of the culture of each individual, of the ontology, the identity of each individual. Well, if Solzhenitsyn was saying to destroy a people, you must first sever their roots. That's what's overwhelming and horrifying to me about the assassination, not just the assassination. Well, how about the murder that then is labeled as assassination, right? So murder would be I'm an individual that my identity is at odds because of this person's rhetoric, meaning their theology, their philosophy, their opinion is at odds with my identity, which is the shooter, right? Their identity, how they lived their life, their personal life, was in contradiction or in conflict with Charlie's theology, philosophy, political persuasion, opinion, stance, institution. It was at odds, right? He was speaking against their interpersonal persuasion, their identity. So if they go against him, okay, they're murdering him. They're going against his theology, philosophy, and so on. Then it becomes assassination. Now it's a representation of the political milieu, assassination. So his example is so deep in our culture. On one side of on a side of the conversation, right? Okay. Why am I bringing up this destroy people? You must first sever their roots, whether intentional or unwittingly. These are two diametrically opposed realities. The person that went against him shot him, how they showed up in their life, how he did and how he was professing that they should and people should. The axioms he was operating from more so like classical American values, like Judeo-Christian values, and the axioms they're operating from more postmodern globalist values. You know what? exemplary of the culture wars. Well, to destroy a people, you must first sever their roots. What are the roots of this culture today? They're at odds, like they're diametrically, the fringes are no longer fringe. It's grown. And so the roots are severed. The fundamental assumptions are being questioned and being questioned and not debated on, like just attack, like
Subverted.
we need conversation more than ever to get through this. But
Yeah.
but the leadership's not there to do it. So Charlie, with all his imperfections, to me at least, is trying. He was having conversations,
Mhm.
and so it's so pain. It's like the bar's been so low on the leadership lid for a long time. I've been thinking that for a long time, and in my opinion, on both sides, like where's the unity? Where's the unity? Where's the unity? So it hurts to see him as a casualty of these roots being severed.
It's tragic because I mean, think about it. You're speaking to an open air, like the way Socrates would speak. They didn't have a qualifier. They didn't have a ticket at the gate. I mean, you speak in controlled rooms, right, with a controlled audience, and at some point you're going to be concerned. Like, who is somebody who doesn't agree with me? Are we going to be able to talk it out, discuss it online, or are they going to get violent? Because they don't know how to articulate a conversation. And the best way to silence someone, you know, we laugh at the movie Indiana Jones when he saw the guy who, had more whips and stuff and he just shot him. We laugh at that moment. It's cinematic history. But in this moment, like, it's not just unanswered questions, it's thousands of people who just received the trauma, right? Like they're gonna have to live with that. Not just the immediate family and the people who worked in the circle, but a lot of kids who have to witness that. And then it talked about it's gonna shape them. Is it safe to speak up, or should I just keep my voice silent? No, stand up, speak up. It's the more of a you can't take us all out, and if you're gonna do that, oh well, it's the end to order. Because right now you mentioned that we have these, rising value clashes of, you're Jewish and you're Christian and your Islamic traditions against the communist, atheist, spiritual ways of, we all have tolerance, but the tolerance is leading to violence. That if you don't agree with me, we can have diversity in every other aspect except that of opinion. When we have different opinions, we're angry. Oh, I can't believe you're one of those. What do you mean? A free thinker? Like, is it dangerous to think? It's going to be dangerous to think. And you've seen it in Bolshevik society. Like, who are the first people to go? Is the thinkers, right? So do we have to become, warriors too? Do we need to have security teams and be strong in ourselves to, if we walk down the street in Center City and, with your lady next to you and somebody's, attacking someone, are we going to just call the police and hope they show up? Which they usually don't. Or do we have to step in there and defend the situation? These are new realities that we didn't think we would have, but the system that we chose to work under is not working for us. So people like Charlie wanted to reform America in a traditional good way and bring everyone together. And
What can you elaborate on that? Like what were some of the things that he professed that were unifying?
it was the soft gaze in his eyes that he was ready to receive. And, we're a lot into, body language and a lot of times we can say, oh, well, what did he say? I can quote all kinds of things he said, but he just opened the door to speak. When the person comes in there all hot and emotional, he's like, what do you have to say? I'm willing to hear you. Like, and that's it. And he gives space, empty space. He's not trying to finish their sentence or talk over them or think for them. Go ahead, have it out. Okay, well, why is it that you think that way? Again, the same introspective curiosity we all explore in our shows. Willing to hear you, and have nothing of judgment to respond with. But logic that says, okay, well, this is where I'm coming from, and perhaps you can see it my way. I may not change in my ways, but I'm grateful that you have a place to share your thoughts, right? And when they come in super hot and they say all kinds of stuff, you're like, all right, wait, don't rip on them. They had the bravery to step to the mic and say something. So once you calm down, do you have anything to say? Right. So rather than the typical clickbait soundbite that, we're all going for that flash, like his stuff is not going to be topical. I think it's going to transcend, the Trump era because a lot of it was value based. And so that's what's going to memorialize a
Mm.
person like Charlie is that he wasn't waving the Trump flag all day because that guy's mortal. Okay, his time will pass as well. He spearheads a movement. A lot of people follow it. If not for him, we would probably collapse into communism by this point. Um, but we need better. What were you gonna say?
I was going to ask you what's wrong with that.
Falling into communism?
Yes, in your view, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, we're kind of into communism right now in terms of the way we can't communicate and freely online without getting warnings or suspensions or shutdowns. But the full it takes away the will to not just the will to live, but the will to work. Wake up first thing in the morning, say, you know what, I'm going to provide well for my family so I can take them out to dinner on a Sunday or take them on a vacation 3 times a year or be there for someone who needs me for their health or for that dream trip or even to build something for the local church or community. If you just democratize, centralize it in the hands of people who are not qualified, but just are artificially assigned seats of power, they're not the best stewards of resources. I see that pretty clearly right now in a Senate and a Congress that they can't even commit to a balanced budget amendment. If you ran your household the way the Congress did, you wouldn't have a house. It belonged to a bank, some other family. It just wouldn't happen. But these people we look up to and we call them public servants, they're serving their own interests. They're serving the interests of their donors. And enough people are waking up and we have enough of these microphones that it's hard to silence us all.
Mm.
There's going to be a lot of mini Charlies out there and inspired movements in England. What do you make of that movement that's rising with this?
I don't know much about it. I did see a video that looked like there was a million people running around. What were they so taken by?
I mean, it's trying to reverse the tide of the Islamification of Europe. Like, we were so tolerant of other cultures that you just had the floodgates open. And rather than having a controlled immigration flow where people come in, they acclimate to the local culture and they're welcome additions to a beautiful society, they overflow the society. The most popular names in England and France are Muhammad, not the local names. And that's going to overshadow. But again, this is following global agendas. So I'm not saying that Charlie stood for all these things,
Oh,
but
I see. But hold on, that's an important piece right there. It seems to me, and I want you to speak for yourself, that what you just said was speaking more to the risk to the system for a new uh, a, um, a novel population coming in at a certain number or quantity in a certain period of time, and how it'd be like if I hired 20 employees tomorrow, but I only have enough capital for five, that could create a lot of capital issues. It could also, if my company staff doubles tomorrow and the new people don't yet know the mission, the vision, our core values, what to do, they don't have job descriptions, it could get very hard to. So I just want to elucidate that if we were to take that soundbite, I think it could be interpreted reactively. Wait, are you saying something negative against those that follow that that religion or that way of life. I don't think that's not how I was interpreting what you were saying. I was interpreting it as like through a cultural business cultural lens. Like if a lot of different people come in at the same time without a flow, without going through the system, the process, that can short circuit a society, which I believe that based on my studies that can actually uh, make it just like a company, right? You hire very quickly and people aren't trained or they don't know the story. Am I totally missing that? Or
I mean, I think it's a blend of things. I think, again, to speak to some of the truth that Charlie would stand for, and having been somebody who nearly got wiped out by the Ottomans, like when you let in too much of a foreign culture into your land, like it can overwhelm it, right? Like you said, a controlled flow maybe can acclimate to local culture, but once you just kind of drop a whole bunch of people in there and they're repopulating like crazy, they're going to overwhelm a society. And
but I want to pinpoint that because it seems to be that those thoughts, common sense in a sense too, not just it's like anthropology or something, sociology, um, get get labeled as hate speech.
Hey, okay, I think it was Charlie who
Like,
who spoke.
are you against Islamic people? I mean, you know what I'm saying? I should ask you that because someone might listen to that for 30 seconds and think, what, he doesn't want Islamic people here, or he doesn't want, you know what I'm saying?
I shop at these venues. We've had these customers. I mean,
I'm not saying that. I
no, no,
don't
no,
think
no, no.
that.
I'm speaking to the idea of flooding a society with a value system that's completely different. Where if you're a hardcore reader of the Quran, it lightly tolerates other societies, right? It puts a tax on them, right? So if we were to live by Sharia laws, that supplants constitutional laws, right? And the fact that Thomas Jefferson had a Quran was because we had to fight the Barbary Wars, right, against Libyans, right? And a modern day Libyan leader who was again, unfairly taken out, Gaddafi, he warned that if we allow just millions and millions of unchecked people from these cultures into Europe, Europe will fall without a single shot being fired. And years after his death, it's coming true. So this is not a me putting down a value system. It's not mine. It's not what I believe in. But and we can go hours into the merits of one value system or another. But any value system where you can't leave without being afraid to being killed, something's wrong with it. Any value system where it's okay to marry a 9-year-old, which is legal in Turkey, is wrong because the woman's not even didn't even have their menstruation cycle yet. But because their prophet, Muhammad did it, then it's okay. But if we said that in US society, that's not acceptable. So again, cultural norm, maybe they have a reason behind it, but it doesn't make sense to me. So if I disagree with it, it doesn't make me hate them. I'll still support their restaurants and their food, but you really can't go in depth on faith. Because if you go in depth on faith, you may not be friends with people anymore. Because you
Well, is that the idea of the religious freedom? I mean, if we have religious freedom that's protected by the structure of society, it, implicit, we're protected from the institute, like the institutions, the government, by to pursue our faith. Um, as individuals or as groups, we can choose to agree to disagree. Like we can have that, like what there's a degree of civility though that I guess has a relationship with our civility has a relationship with what our pursuit of education, our pursuit of career, our pursuit of family, our engagement in our community, civility. As we engage less with our community, as we're more addicted to the feedback loops on these phones that program our thinking. The most scary thoughts are those that, yeah, they're the assumptions that aren't questioned. They're like, I'm not aware that this thing is programming me to think a certain way. Um, I was going somewhere with this, I swear. Um,
We have been programmed, right, from years, and we grew up.
oh,
Go
no, yeah, the programming is part of life. It's not a conspiracy against life. It's part of we even you study the self's individuality. It's partially constructed by others. It's hey, we're having a conversation. We're growing and we're shaping and molting together. We have to have the conversation. We have to be able to have dialogue to course correct our behavior so we could cooperate. And like you talk about in some culture, something that sounds shocking to me about this young child may be tolerated there. Well, if it's not tolerated here, its degree of tolerance has to do with the conversations, like what we think is okay, what we think is not okay, and people have to constantly talk and make decisions around what's okay and not okay, and if they to maintain reality, to maintain sanity, to maintain the order. If the conversations break down, the whole thing breaks down. You can't see up, you can't see down, you don't know left from right.
Yeah,
Why is it okay in one culture, not in another? Because, well, that's really complex, but we have to we have to talk and think, and it's maybe too complex for one person to figure out or one generation to figure out. It's like an accumulation of generations. Like what happens when the generations aren't talking?
a lot of times we weren't meant to coexist. I mean, if you look at the countries of Europe, they had their strong ethnocentric identities for millennia, right? I'm not saying they have to look a certain way, but they looked a certain way, right? I go around, they're like, "Oh, you have the Greek nose." I'm like, "Oh, thanks." Right? Or you have the certain eyes. Like, okay, great. Like, so these are features, but if you don't have these kind of kids in the future, those features will get washed out. And I'm not saying it's bad, it's just how people are. And some people want to maintain their cultural identities and values and languages, and others, it's less of a priority. But if you stay in these lands and you have uncontrolled immigration, like in Athens, I don't walk the streets in Athens. I don't recognize it. Doesn't look Greek. And again, it's not that I'm hateful, is that if I look different and someone comes from another country where it's okay to beat up on somebody who doesn't look like you and you get away with it, well, now you get away with it in another country. Right? It's happening here in Philly. You get away with, hurting people, and the delayed consequences or none at all. So, if people think that it's okay to act violent or scream violence or call people names and hide behind your fake names, like they're going to find you. This is proof, and whether it's Palantir or some Big Brother pre-crime thought experiment, we may pay for this cost of exposing people who love this tragedy. Because if the next time there's some other event and we all galvanize and say something, maybe they can find us too. So let it be a lesson that if you have hate, journal about it. Share it with your therapist or your close loved ones, but don't vent online, because everything you throw
Mm,
online is permanent. So that's why you have to be
mm,
graceful, kind, and you know, again, think like Charlie did, right? He's moving, I guess, people in England. A million strong gathered with Tommy Robinson, who's been arrested a bunch of times, just for pointing out, again, Islamic rape gangs. That's not putting down a faith. It's people who happen to be of this background. And so it's an identity. This is what they look like, and this is what they did. So whether it's their belief structure or aspects of the belief structure that they personified as code, as part of their purpose and identity, is to go out there and cause havoc. Well, that's not to be tolerated in a civilized society. British gentlemen.
Mm.
I want to go there one day and get a suit from Savile Row. Will it be safe? Right? If it's not safe, why bother going? They just had a state dinner for Trump and a whole bunch of dignified people with King Charles there. And he raised the glass and he said, would our forefathers have imagined that we would have this moment right now? Right? While London is burning, while Paris is burning, right? Come on, they live in a myopic vision. They're good. Their kids will be good, but maybe their grandkids won't be. So like this hold to false power has to end. And let a lot of Charlies rise. Let them be the Congress people, senators, governors, mayors, and leaders of our country. These seats are too easily taken by the least qualified because they're not well paid. A well-paid person goes into private industry and creates doesn't get attacked every day. You might get attacked, but like if you're a CEO of a healthcare company and people are taking mercy on that guy too. He just got acquitted of terroristic charges. Like, you know what I mean? Like what kind of world do we live in where there's no justice and people can be taken out? So that system has to be sprayed to its root. That needs to be burned and incinerated because then it's a subversion of those who stand for liberty. And the tree of liberty was just watered by the blood of a patriot. You know that quote, right? From Nathan Hale. Well, the quote from Nathan Hale was, "I regret that I have but one life to give for my country." Right? This guy died once. We all die, but his death carries a very heavy meaning. If he died in bed, after a restful night, it would be a tragedy. It would be sad. But in this public venue, it's immortalized. It's never to be forgotten. People won't even know what he stood for, but they'll know that a young person of peace just died in front of a crowd. That's just to think that any of us could speak in front of a crowd and someone doesn't like you and says, "I'm going to end his life right now." Are we prepared to meet our maker? Are there things that we have to clean up in our, in our closet, in our life, and forgive people before we can stand up there and speak our truth? Because our light might be taken out and we can't go back. But we can pray for this person, right? We can carry his light, and you're doing an excellent job, like with this series of moving talks, and I think you know it, that mic has to be handed to all of us to stand up and speak truth, to be willing to speak to people who oppose us, and be nice, right? Be kind, be direct, be ourselves, but not use hate or vile language or snap like debate points to kind of outshine someone. It's a petty victory. And you see what happened here. They took out a nice person. The moment we're angry, the violence will come sooner. They're already prone to violence. You know, 1 out of 4 left-leaning people say it's okay to take the violence when you disagree with someone. Our side, the conservative free thinking side, is 3%. Again, it's a fringe factor. It's negligible. We would never take up arms. Even now, we want people to come to peace. We don't want there to be war. Because if war happens, then who's your enemy? We don't live in the redcoats are coming. You don't know who your enemy is. They don't look like you. They might look like you. It all varies depending on what's going on that day and how we plan to survive. So we need to reestablish what it means to be an American. That that even if we have different values, we must coexist. We must build brotherly love, right? The city we were both born in stands for brotherly love. It's where the nation, Declaration of Independence was found, the Constitution was signed, and people visit this place, but we don't stand for liberty anymore. We stand for division and what feels right and what gets likes online, but ignoring social issues. You know, Charlie stood for that. He stood for things that made sense. And when he spoke to college kids who never saw a day of reality. I think he woke a lot of them up, and that's his impact. And we have to, reflect on that and say, okay, how can we do that to other young people? Anyone who's misguided, instead of just nodding off and minding your own business, step up for a moment. Says, young man, young lady, why do you think that way? What makes you think that way? And let bring them to the attention of your show or other people's show who can shed light on a different point of view. Because if you're surrounded by groupthink, hate, of communist division, of atheism, you might think this is okay, but it's a cesspool. You want to find your belief system. You want to find something you can stand for, and ideally create a family structure. Like that's lost on people now. We're in this time of Sodom and Gomorrah, and I feel like he was taken out because he lives family values, and that was a danger to the agenda. So it had to end, right? But it didn't. It just began.
Churchill said this isn't the beginning of the end, it's the end beginning.
Mm.
I think this isn't the beginning of the end. This is the end of beginning. I want to share Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance, one of the most famous ideas from a book called The Open Society and Its Enemies. Karl Popper was a philosopher of science, one of the more prolific philosophers of science. He wrote in the 20th century, friends with Einstein. Um, but it addresses the tension between being tolerant as a society and protecting that very tolerance from being destroyed. So the definition, unlimited tolerance, can lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If a tolerant society extends tolerance even to those who are intolerant, the intolerant may eventually seize power and abolish tolerance itself. So first, the core argument is a free and open society values tolerance, letting people express diverse ideas. Two, but if we tolerate intolerant ideologies, e.g., those that suppress free speech, that demand absolute conformity, or advocate violence, they can use that freedom to destroy tolerance. Three, therefore, a tolerant society must be willing to defend itself, sometimes by refusing to tolerate the intolerant when they pose a genuine threat. Quote, here's a quote from the book, 1945. Unlimited tolerance must lead to the disappearance of tolerance. If we extend unlimited tolerance even to those who are intolerant, if we are not prepared to defend a tolerant society against the onslaught of the intolerant, then the tolerant will be destroyed, and tolerance with them.
I mean, look, what remember Malcolm X's famous quote?
Here, I just want to say he argued that we should respond with rational debate and persuasion where possible. But if
Yeah,
intolerant movements refuse dialogue and instead use violence or coercion, society must have the right to defend itself even by suppressing them. So, so Karl Popper, I mean, his literature is just unbelievable in the spirit of helping, think through contradictions and paradox. I recommend Karl Popper for any of the listeners. Sorry, Demetri, what were you saying?
no, it speaks to, well, to your point with this quote. It speaks to our time that the moment someone even gets a whiff that you think anything different, you could agree on 90 out of 100 things, but the moment there's a little bit of difference, oh, how many differences do we have? Can we be friends anymore? There's nuance of well, we more or less agree that we should coexist in a happy society, and the government has a limited role in what they should do. And oh, unless you think they should have an oversized role. Okay, well, that's where we have contention, right? Whether it should be charities that help each other or government that makes these decisions. So, we can't have panels anymore of like an open society of people just coming together. We vote for people that we think are good, but then serve their own agendas. And they can't leave power until the next election. And if they get replaced, they're more or less replaceable by a similar person who's anointed through their power of the person who's outgoing. So like we have this chain of bad command. So what can we tolerate? So we're tolerating, people who are leftist, right? There's liberal thinking, and then there's leftist thinking, which is communist. And the moment and the reason why communist is dangerous is because they don't tolerate differences. They'll make you think that things are great, that it's great to have a free grocery store in New York City, and this Mamdani is going to be he's going to be the next Obama and Messiah and wonderful deliverer of everything free. But if you're literally, again, his words, saying we're going to tax rich white people at higher rates, you're already admitting to discrimination. So we need to be tolerant of you and everything you stand for. But again, you are intolerant, right? This is the definition of Popper's quote. It personified, right? We're living in those times. Like he speaks to the abstract. I'm like immediately connecting it to people in power. That when somebody restricts your ability to do commerce, if there's a COVID lockdown, and we just allow it, and we don't resist because we're afraid to go to jail or get fined.
I think this is why I'm so bothered.
Hmm.
Um, I want to highlight a paradox within this. Charlie and Popper, there's overlap and there's some tension. And the tension, on one hand, he championed unflinching free speech, right? Even when it offended. On the other hand, his critics argued that his words spread intolerance, raising the very Popperian paradox. But Charlie, so he encouraged more speech. So courage and more speech. I believe that opens up those that opposed his ideas to meet him in the square and like if they see differently, to defeat his arguments. Having read so much philosophy and so many of the philosophers that undergird postmodernism, I believe those people exist. There are many people that could debate him and could have actually really give him a run for his money. Where the hell were these people though? Where's the courage in this world, right? Maybe that's a paradox of that side of the equation. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we can philosophize. So, but you know, I just want to at least highlight that uh, some of the tension between a Popper and a Charlie would be that Popper, as if I read his stance, Popper advocated uh uh yeah, Popper allowed limits. So like intolerance that became violent or coercive or aimed to destroy tolerance cannot be tolerated. Um, Popper would say, yes, if speech becomes a movement bent on ending free speech, we must stop it. I think no matter like ultimately, I think the way that Charlie led his example was to welcome all speech, and that ultimately make your case stronger, make your case better, and you'll have an opportunity. That's your opportunity. That's how you make the whole equation better. And I think part of where the grief would come was like, you know, rather than that occurring, here's the weapon, you know, here's the use of force. Now, the interesting thing about so I'll just leave it at that. I just
You don't want to expand on that at all?
I
I, So meaning once
Should
you
I? I
weapon,
should. I should
just
expand that.
if just quickly, because yeah, I don't want to leave the audience on a cliffhanger. Like the moment somebody uses a weapon, you think rationally, you're like, I won the argument. Like, no, you lost the
Here's why that's well, yeah, lost because the part of the value of the Second Amendment for the individual in it from a cultural as a cultural architect, I would say would be for the individual to have a voice relative to the overwhelming force of power. So like that would be like either an outsider coming into the culture, like whether it's a house, if we're using the metaphor of a house, an intruder coming into a home, or from a culture standpoint, like a country, other, civilization invading. You have your weapon protects you, protects your body, it protects your homestead, it protects your tongue, it protects your eyes, your children, it protects your culture. Okay. Internally, the second protects the individual from the government, the overwhelming force of institution, of the corruption of the institution. Um, like if you don't like your company, you can leave. You don't need, you know, you can quit, you can go. But what if you don't want to go? You only have one company, only have one. This is my nation. This is my identity. This is my country. I don't want to go. I can't go. It's part of my identity. So here's my voice. I can't talk. I can't think. I have the gun. The gun represents the First Amendment when it can't be used. The gun is the voice. It is the words. It's the thoughts, words, deeds. That's what the gun is. The one First and Second Amendment are what they're connected, inextricably linked to the individual. When the individual can't speak and think, the gun is the extension of that. Is how I've always thought of it that way, like from a cultural viewpoint. So it's what's so interesting to me psychologically is that Charlie, like he was shot, his opponent, you know, it's like they're not using their tongue or the mind. They're not using the First Amendment to beat him. When they can't, it's a possibility. They're using the second. So what the heck is going on? They feel so powerless, or so resentful, or so un, incapable. So I'm like, we've sunk so low where we're using the second because the second is there to go against the first. I'm sorry, the second is there for when we don't have the first. So in that debate, he's using the first, and his opponent is using the second against their neighbor, against their neighbor. Love your neighbor. No, hate your neighbor. We're hating our neighbors.
right.
To me, that's overwhelming because the purpose of the second, the right to bear arms, is to protect the individual when the first isn't in effect, when there's a breakdown in the culture, in the institutions, or when there's like potential invasion, or like if you have the right to protect law enforcement's role is to protect you and your community, but might not work. So am I making any sense? I
You're
just
making
I'm
all the sense. I mean, I live in a society where the law enforcement doesn't work, where I've called 911 and it rings 20 times and doesn't get answered, where an hour passes and nothing happens. So I live in that society. Now, if I may, I don't know about correcting, but just lightly editing, when you say that the person used the Second Amendment to defeat the First Amendment, I would say argue that he's abusing the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I don't like the way that sounded.
Because
That's not trying.
using it
Yeah.
makes it sound like all of us can be activated tomorrow
No,
and
oh
be
no.
terrible
No,
people. Because that's what the left wants to say when they take away guns. Every time there's a tragedy, they want good people to stop having the guns. They don't ask bad people to turn in their guns. That's, the bad people will keep their guns because it took a lot of work and extra money to get their guns through illicit channels. But honest people, I've had a gun for years and I can still carry and I never used it. I probably could have used it when I was attacked twice, but I didn't feel like it went to that moment of this person's out to kill me. Like they're out to hurt me. Okay. But if they were out to kill me, I would have to use it. And you would have heard of me, in more prominence because when it bleeds, it's a headline.
yeah, I didn't mean the Second Amendment. I mean the the purpose of the Second Amendment is to to represent speech when the first is not in order as it relates to the individual relative to the institution. Because the first is the our self, our individual capacity is related to good thoughts, good words, good deeds. That's the Persian prophet, Zoroaster. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. You have to think, you have to speak. Our word and our actions are judged among men and among the culture. Our reputation, that's our goodwill, that's our name. It's that's a part of our identity, our individuality. Have we develop a self? Is our right? Our social networks, our family, our friends, or even our enemies, our adversaries, shape our identity. Our children, our parents. It's the self. It's Peterson's checklist. What's your relationship like with the partner, the kids, the friends? You have hobbies, education. Have you been educated to your level of ambition? All of the, what role you play in the community? How about your faith? Like the checklist of the self, and the ability to speak has a relationship with ourself and our identity and our how we create and actualize goals, which has a positive feedback of our capability to problem solve and to think and to develop a meaningful, cohesive life. That those things, when these systems break down and we can't speak, we can't think, we lose our sense of self, our anxiety increases, our life becomes less meaningful, we become less capable of empathy and reason and the virtues that you're talking, courage. We lose our courageousness, we lose our sense of self and our orientation towards the future and our ability to burden the past. Kierkegaard, life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. And we start being eaten by the culture and killing each other. Like we're in survival mode. We don't have, and of course, violence is the next. Violence is like the dopamine kick. Violence and aggression, and we're in a constant fight or flight, a state of self-awareness without the ability to respond to the awe. So then we're just afraid and naked and scared and angry and sinful in the constant state of reactivity and with the same the same impulses as we had before. All the sins, the seven deadly sins. What are the seven deadly sins? What are the seven? Let's look it up. What are the seven deadly sins? I don't know them off my head. Maybe I should memorize it. What are the seven deadly sins? Do you know them, Demetri?
Gluttony, lust. I think there's
Pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony,
mhm.
sloth, wrath. So pride is excessive belief in one's own abilities, arrogance, self-exaltation, seen as the root of all sins. Interesting. Oh, so that's interesting. How prideful are we as a culture if how prideful is it reflecting that we are that if how prideful are we as a culture if what's reflected in the political discourse is this degree of contempt and lack of empathy from both sides. Pride comes before the fall. Greed, avarice, intense desire for wealth, possessions, or power beyond what is needed. Lust, intense or disordered craving for sexual pleasure.
When people are, when they gloat on the death of others, it's almost like a perversion of sorts. You know that you're enjoying, like you're fully sadistic,
Well,
right?
first of all, but I would say that is not an odd response to me in the sense that both parties have grief, even if it's implicit, not explicit. It might be explicit for you and me. We're explicitly grieving over Charlie's loss. The other side is implicitly grieving, and that grief is projected in boastfulness, pride. I told you so. That's a way to not face the anxiety of the suffering that is implicit in the fact that that's going to challenge any narrative. Instead of, if there was unity and trust and mutual respect, then if there was enough of those weeds that have been cut, the seed, the wheat, Solzhenitsyn, cut at the root, the root. If the roots were there, it'd be an opportunity to unify through
Mm.
collaboration. We can all agree it's not right. That wasn't right. We can all agree that wasn't not right. Forget the content. At the end of the day, if I was that person, and a father, and my kids saw me, everybody in theory could agree that was not right.
Yeah,
But why is that not the case?
because
Because
we have broken culture, we have broken values,
thank you.
broken arrows everywhere. When, like, somebody I used to call a friend, I guess, leaked out too much and said he had it coming for all the stuff he stood for, or that he said things that are anti-gay or anti this. And again, just like you said earlier, if somebody stands for Christian values and then they equate it as anti-gay values, no, they still love you, right? He's still nice to you. Just because the values, again, if the value system says, in a Christian traditional sense, marriage is between a man and a woman. That's what the traditional Christian values say. You're not going to amend them for modern times. That's just what we stand for. So to put a false label of hate for someone who lives a different life than you and then says they have it coming, that's really mean. Like, I can't, again, broken values.
What would Jesus do?
After a person like this dies, or with respect to
What would Jesus say to the person?
who rebuked him, he would say, pull out the log from your eye before you even dare criticize anybody else. And if you're taking joy in the pain of others, imagine the pain that's coming to you, because that's a grave sin, right? I offer condolences every time anyone on Facebook, right? Some relative that I never met passes away, my condolences, my prayers for you, right? Immediately, there's a little bit of sorrow. If it's somebody of a different political party, I don't say, thank God they're dead. Oh, their evil reign will end. I'll say, oh, their family will miss them. Let their memory be a blessing, right? We say these things. We go to funerals. We hug people that we may not see that often because we want to be there for them in these moments of loss. And if you're not going to let somebody mourn in a time of loss, like, you're not human. You're devolving into, you know, primal needs. And if that's all you're focused on, don't come, crying victim status or crying for our compassion and tolerance when you clearly can't offer a little bit of space for someone to grieve. Like,
Politics is so arbitrary and cannot be the fulcrum by which we build our culture. The fulcrum by which we build our culture must be something else. And we're going to find out what that is.
I would say faith. I say that we have faith in humanity, right? Because we're not going to have the same beliefs. It's not going to be standard. Like you said, if our, Judeo-Christian values built America and it took us through the Gilded Age, it might have stopped with the institution of the Federal Reserve Act, 1913, right? Or our entry into World War I and all these other wars that slowly bankrupt this country. So, are we going to lead movements? Yeah. How many other people will enlist? We don't know. Because right now it's a war of thoughts and feelings and emotions, and if they're lower in base level, we're not going to have a reasoned discussion. We're just going to go into war. And it's going to be a matter of who has more resources and who can ally more forces. And we're going to start studying, how to command certain areas and re-educate others. And it's not places we want to be. Like, a lot of times in ancient history, people were soldiers and they had battles, but you remember the King Pyrrhus, right? Remember his generals were like, "Oh, we can win this battle, but it'll come at a great cost." Oh, we can win? That's
Hmm.
all he cared about. And then after such a horrible loss, he's like, "Oh, it wasn't worth the win." And then he
Hmm.
lost. He lost in the end because he exhausted his forces in that hollow victory.
I'd like to end this show with a reminder of humility weighted to pride, charity to greed, chastity to lust, kindness to envy, temperance to gluttony, patience to wrath, and diligence against sloth. And thank you, Demetri, for coming on the Culture Matters podcast and giving some bearing tribute to the life of a young man survived by two children, a wife, and a movement of people that are moving that I hope can move towards love and courage in embracing their enemies and bringing them into reason and hope and compassion and empathy, and we can renew the bonds of this culture. And I hope that Charlie is more of John the Baptist, and there's hope for our culture.
He gave,
And through the Culture Matters podcast, we can maybe do some good. We're sorry, go ahead.
I mean, you quoted John the Baptist. They both gave their head for the cause. John was decapitated because of a party, and he was mesmerized. The King Herod was mesmerized by a dancer, and he said, "I will give you anything close to half my kingdom. Just ask for it." And he's expecting to give a bunch of wealth away, and her mom whispered in the ear, says, "The head of John the Baptist." Why? Because he was evangelist. He was a humble man, and everybody looked up to him, right? Just like Charlie, everybody looked up to this person. And one evil force was probably told, right? I don't think they're smart enough to do it on their own volition. They were hired, orchestrated, or something to say, you know what, this person stands for a movement, take them out. And then their movement goes with them. But they didn't know that people look further along and say that the debate will not end. But now it would just widen to a bigger audience. So thank you for having me on. Thanks for giving his light the proper respect it deserves. And I look forward to further vigil and commemorating what he's done in the work that we do.
If you're listening to this episode, please share this with an enemy in love, and we will see you next time on the Culture Matters podcast.
All right.